Nigeria's Center for Disease Control confirms 14 new cases as total tally hits 288. President Buhari Covid-19 task force team to meet over nationwide lockdown. In international news, Covid-19 disrupts religious holiday celebrations in Jerusalem. And in sport, Australian National Rugby League competition to restart May the 28th.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, has announced 14 new COVID-19 cases and 1 death in the country. The agency broke the news via its Twitter handle on Thursday night. Lagos has the highest number with 13 new cases, while Delta recorded 1. The 7 persons discharged in Lagos earlier on Thursday also reflected in NCDC's new figure of a total of 51 discharged patients. The agency did not give details of the deceased in its tweets. Nigeria currently has 288 confirmed cases. The center also corrected an error in the figures it released on Wednesday, declaring 2 new cases in Bauchi. So far, Lagos has the highest number of patients with 158 cases. The state, which is currently under lockdown, has indicated that it would commence house-to-house testing as part of efforts to flatten the curve. Could Nigeria declare a nationwide lockdown? That is one key issue that the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 takes up with President Buhari today. The task force, led by the Secretary General to the Federation, said at a press briefing on Thursday it had collected data to that effect. Lagos, Osun, and Abuja have been under federal lockdown for about 2 weeks now as part of efforts to cut the spread of coronavirus. Some states have also imposed lockdowns and a series of measures aimed at controlling the spread of the virus. As of Thursday night, the number of cases stood at 288 with 51 discharged patients and 7 deaths. The federal government has promised to provide insurance cover for all frontline health workers battling to keep Nigerians safe from the coronavirus pandemic. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning Zainab Ahmed says adequate insurance, compensations and support will be provided for the frontline health workers during and in the aftermath of COVID-19. It is not news that some of the workers suffer pathogen exposure, long working hours, psychological distress, fatigue, acute occupational burnout, stigma, and physical and psychological violence. Ahmed says the government is taking steps to activate, release, and enhance the hazard allowances provided in the remuneration structure of the federal health sector workers. And while the federal government has unveiled mobile testing and treatment vehicles for combating the pandemic in rural communities, the mobile testing vehicles were conceptualized as part of the telemedicine project for rural medical services initiated by the National Space Research and Development Agency. The agency, under the Ministry of Science and Technology, is embarking on the project in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. The vehicle has a bed, waiting room, and laboratory testing facilities with a medical team comprising ear and throat experts. Nigerian politician Jimmy Agbaje is worried about the relaxed lockdown in some states. Agbaje said in a series of tweets the decision by some state governors to pause social distancing advisory for Easter and Jumat will be counterproductive and could reverse the gains achieved this far in stemming the tide of the pandemic. Agbaje says, quote, "Why pause at this time when cases are on the increase with more states being affected?" End quote. He said this stage of community infection is the most dangerous. Agbaje said with Nigeria's weak health system, our strongest weapon to survive this pandemic is social distancing. States like Imo, Ebonyi, Bayelsa, and Abia, which earlier imposed restrictions, relaxed them on Thursday. Imo State Governor Hope Uzodinma said residents are free today to shop for Easter. Ebonyi State government also granted a partial restoration of religious activities in the state. The government also relaxed the ban on burials by giving those in the state 12 days beginning yesterday to bury their dead. Abia State government announced a 2-day intrastate movement. Rivers, Bayelsa and Kogi states governments also temporarily relaxed the restrictions for Friday Jumat prayers and Easter celebrations.
Coming up, African stories. Ethiopia declares state of emergency over coronavirus pandemic. And later, international news. Covid-19 disrupts religious holiday celebrations in Jerusalem.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has declared a state of emergency to help curb the spread of the new coronavirus. The country has recorded 52 cases and 2 deaths. Ethiopia is Africa's second most populous nation with more than 100 million people. Reporter Koleta Wanjohi has the details.
The Meskel Square is Addis Ababa's main grounds for public events. On a normal day, it is usually a busy place, including being a bus park for those traveling up country. But that is changing. The area is being fenced off. The federal government is now planning to use a state of emergency to impose more strict measures. The constitution allows the state to declare a state of emergency during an epidemic, and the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has warned of grave legal measures against anyone who undermines the fight against this pandemic. According to the Attorney General, the state of emergency will help remove certain regulatory barriers and permit the government and healthcare providers more flexibility in the efforts to contain the spread of the COVID-19 epidemic.
So far, the measures that have been taken include stopping large gatherings and sporting events, closure of schools, 14-day quarantine for all travelers arriving to Ethiopia, cessation of over 80 Ethiopian Airlines flight destinations, temporary closures of bars and nightclubs. As well, work-from-home measures have been put into place for government employees, aimed at decreasing public transport crowding. Additionally, closure of land borders, with the exception of entry and exit of goods, have also been one of the key measures that have been put in place.
The government is concerned that cases are being reported beyond the capital, Addis Ababa.
Indeed, contact tracing is one of the main response components in the COVID-19 pandemic control. And all means are being utilized to register, trace, and quarantine contacts of confirmed cases. As contacts could sometimes be located in different regions and localities, it requires a lot of alignment and integration work with the respective regions. So there might be a little bit of a delay in that, but all of the needful is being done in ensuring that contact tracing is also something that is being strengthened.
The Attorney General has confirmed that, unlike previous times when the implementation of a declared state of emergency was overseen by security forces, this one will be overseen by a council of ministers.
South Africa has the highest rate of COVID-19 infections on the African continent, and it has put in place one of the fastest and most forceful responses to the coronavirus pandemic. The country has shut down its borders and physically locked down the country before even recording its first death from the virus. Now it has begun a mass COVID-19 screening program. Reporter Rene Del-Kamer has the story.
In the rural town of Paarl, a COVID-19 triage and testing unit is still under construction and will soon be used to screen and test patients who present with respiratory problems. The plan is to have around 17 of these units throughout the Western Cape province, which has the second highest number of COVID-19 patients in South Africa.
This interventions of having the triage and testing outside We don't want to mix all the patients. And then you're sitting in there, joining the whole EC. It will mean that we have to now quarantine all the people who have been there. Whereas, at least for here, you find that those who are infectious, mostly with the respiratory problems, we could be able to sift them immediately and test. So that's where we are.
What we will see on this side is anybody who screens positive for COVID. So you've got the respiratory tract infection, either you're coughing, you've got a sore throat, you've got a fever with shortness of breath, anybody. So it's a child, an adult, an old person, anybody who screens positive for COVID, according to the NICD guidelines, will come on this side.
The minister then travelled to the township of Mbukweni in the Cape Winelands, a high-density area, an area which has been identified as an area of concern for the possible spread of community transmission of the novel coronavirus.
We do know that most of the people cannot come quickly to whether to go to their private labs and so forth when they are presenting with any symptoms. So that's why we take services to them.
The health minister admitted that she was concerned about the possibility of an exponential surge in the number of COVID-19 patients, especially with regard to a shortage of protective gear in South African hospitals.
Across South Africa, if we get the worst scenario, there will be a challenge of the protective gear. If we get the worst scenario, as of now, everything is under control.
She urged people throughout her province and her country to observe the rules of South Africa's national lockdown.
But I understand that we are still early in terms of the disease in South Africa, so everyone is terrified that what about me? That's why we urge people, we stay here for you, stay home for us.
Door-to-door COVID-19 screening and testing will continue throughout the next week and beyond.
World Health Organization officials said on Thursday some African countries could see a peak in coronavirus cases in the coming weeks. The advised testing should be urgently increased in the region. WHO Africa Program Manager for Emergency Response, Marka Yao, said in a media teleconference on Thursday the numbers have already doubled during the last 4 days. He said learning from what happened in China and Europe, if the trend continues, some African countries may face a huge peak very soon. He didn't name the countries that may be affected. WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus told diplomats in Geneva, without help and action now, poor countries and vulnerable communities could suffer massive devastation. Meanwhile, the World Bank has said in a report published on Thursday, although Africa accounts for a fraction of global cases of the disease, its countries are feeling the economic impact. It says the outbreak is expected to push sub-Saharan Africa into recession in 2020.
When we return, international news. COVID-19 disrupts religious holiday celebrations in Jerusalem. And later, sport. Australian National Rugby League competition to restart May the 28th.
You are watching ANN.
Somewhere in the world, every second of the day, news is happening. And of course, Nigeria is bustling with news day and night. That is why ANN doesn't sleep. Our eyes are peeled, wide open, so no story escapes our radar. We stay abreast of world events and happenings at home. We keep you up to the minute in the world of sports. We give you information to stay on top of your investments and all the hard facts you'll need to navigate your day. If you miss us on air, you can keep up to date on our website and on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. We are ANN, African News Network. We do news right in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. On the international scene, Several religious celebrations are being observed today and in this season. For example, today is a Christian commemoration of Good Friday, a day when Christian faithful mark the torture and death of Jesus Christ on the cross. This event usually attracts thousands of Christian faithful to Jerusalem. But this year, the coronavirus pandemic has shut down all physical gatherings, forcing the sealing off of many of the holy sites. Stephanie Freed is in Jerusalem.
This time of year, Jerusalem is usually buzzing. Jews getting ready for Passover, Christians observing Easter rituals, Muslims shopping for Ramadan. COVID-19 has wiped that out. Islam's third holiest site, Al-Aqsa Mosque, is closed. There's no access to Judaism's most revered relic, the Western Wall. Doors to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, one of Christianity's most sacred places, are locked.
This is the first time in 700 years the Church of the Holy Sepulchre has been shut down for an extended period. It's closed until further notice. No one knows when it's going to reopen.
Priests from major denominations say they will pray at the church on behalf of all followers this Easter. Across the globe, synagogues, churches, and mosques are closed. Traditional Passover gatherings with family and friends are outlawed in Israel this year as the country goes into pre-holiday curfew intended to curb any urges to hold large family get-togethers despite coronavirus regulations. Ramadan starts later this month. Jerusalem's Muslim community won't speculate on the prospect of observing the holy month under the shroud of COVID-19. They are hoping and praying that in a few short weeks, something might change.
World trade is expected to fall by between 13 and 32% this year as the COVID-19 pandemic disrupts normal economic activity and life around the world. The World Trade Organization has said in its annual trade statistics and outlook report that the decline would likely exceed the trade slump brought on by the global financial crisis of 2008. The report's estimates of expected recovery in 2021 are equally uncertain, with outcomes dependent largely on the duration of the outbreak and the effectiveness of the policy responses. WTO Director General Roberto Azevedo says the immediate goal is to bring the pandemic under control and mitigate the economic damage to people, companies and countries. He recommends policymakers begin planning for the aftermath of the pandemic. Azevedo said a rapid and vigorous rebound is possible if countries work together rather than if each country acts alone.
Worse than during the global financial crisis. WTO international trade is forecast to fall between 13 to 32% this year as COVID-19 disrupts global commerce. The World Trade Organization says in a fresh report that the drop would be worse than during the global financial crisis. The WTO said that the wide range in its forecast was due to the unpredictable nature of the pandemic. Governments worldwide have locked down businesses and travel to contain the outbreak, hitting supply chains. The WTO also noted the scale of any recovery next year is equally uncertain.
China and Russia have decided to close their borders in Inner Mongolia by Saturday as coronavirus infections in Russia have surpassed 10,000. Chinese officials say this is part of efforts to stop infected travelers from crossing the border from Russia to reinfect China.
Another Chinese city is entering lockdown. In Suifenhe, a city on the China-Russian border, people have been ordered to stay indoors due to an increase in coronavirus cases. According to the government, each family can send one member out shopping every 3 days, and all residents are required to register pass permits and scan smartphone health codes when entering and leaving their compounds. Masks and temperature checks are all mandatory. Meanwhile, over 3,500 government officials are going deep inside the more than 300 communities across the region to make sure that there's not a single missed case.
We work round the clock to provide door-to-door service to vulnerable groups such as seniors and people with disabilities. Volunteers in the community are in contact with them every day to find out about their needs and are always ready to help.
In addition, the Suifenhe port, a major land checkpoint at the border, has shut down its passenger inspection channel and tightened checks on freight inspection. Everyone coming through the border from Suifenhe is required to undergo nucleic acid tests and be quarantined in designated facilities.
After 14 days of compulsory quarantine, they will quarantine themselves again at home for another 14 days.
Meanwhile, a new hospital set up in an existing building is due to open this weekend, intended for patients with mild symptoms.
There are 13 floors in total in this building, and we have mainly converted the first 11 floors. The first 2 floors will be used for medical staff, and patients will be treated on the 3rd floor to the 11th floor.
City officials say construction is expected to be completed on April 11, and around 400 medical staff are expected to work in the hospital. Now, over 120 medical workers have been sent from across the province to Suifenhe to support local hospitals. Authorities hope that all these urgent efforts will help to bring back life to normal as soon as possible.
Up next, sport. Australian National Rugby League competition to restart May the 28th. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sport, Arsenal boss Mikel Arteta says he has now fully recovered from coronavirus. The 37-year-old tested positive for the virus 10 days ago, just before the Premier League postponed all its fixtures. Players and staff at Arsenal have been self-isolating since Arteta was diagnosed. Arteta self-isolated after coming into contact with Olympiacos president Evangelos Marinakis during Arsenal's recent Europa League clash. Marinakis subsequently tested positive. Officials of Australia's National Rugby League say competition will restart by the end of May if coronavirus restrictions are relaxed. The league was stopped after just 2 rounds of the 2020 season. The pandemic has decimated sports with a cancellation or suspension of most campaigns. Thursday's decision were made after a phone hookup with representatives from each of the 16 NRL clubs. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details of these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a safe Easter weekend.